Hey, welcome back to the Big Ranch Show. Thank you for joining me. The other day on TikTok, I made a video talking about the transgender youth situation down in Texas, where they are trying to kidnap little kids from their families for giving them affirming, care for their transgender children. Unfortunately, somebody came back with a response that I didn't want to respond to there, but I do want to talk about here because I believe people on YouTube there may be some people that I can reach that we could talk to about the situation. The person asked me why I was so concerned with the sexuality of children. First off, the insinuation is disgusting. Okay? Let's start that off right off the bat. The insinuation is just disgusting. Secondly, they totally don't understand, and I want to see this as an educational choice, right? Or thing. But they don't understand the difference between sex, sexuality, and gender. And so I thought I'd make a short little video where I try to discuss, at least in part, the differences between those three things. You see in the graphic here where it says sex. It has to do with the bits you're born with, right? The parts that you were born with when you come out of the womb. And the doctor sees them and says, boy, girl, slaps you on the butt and moves you on to the next table or whatever, right? The thing is, that's not always a binary thing. Right? It's not always gonna be male, female. Sometimes you have intersex people. You have people that have ambiguous genitalia, where doctors don't know unless they do blood work to find out what they are genetically, who they are genetically. Right? But that's not usually your first concern when a child comes out. You're worried about making sure they're healthy and otherwise healthy, and getting what they need, and then you take care of that later, right? But people are born, all sorts of ways. There are people who've even been born with no genitalia. It's not unheard of. It has happened. But there are intersex people. There are, people that come out all sorts of different ways, right? But that's your sex. Your sex is what you're born with. Now, people will sit there and say, then, why are you trying to change that? Well, we'll get into how they're wrong in a minute. But the thing is, people confuse sex and gender. They think your sex is the same as your gender. But it's not. Sex is a fact. It's what you are, or it's what you're born with, right? It's what you have. You can't change the fact of what you were born with. Now, you can change it later, right? But you can't change the fact that that's how you were born. That's a fact. But not all the time is that those parts that you were born with going to meld with what's in your brain. Because gender is how you identify yourself. Do you identify as being male or female? Or something else? It's not a matter of what's in your underwear. It's a matter of how you feel on the inside. How you identify yourself internally. Myself, I have presented as male for the better part of 40 years. Even though since I was 11 years old, I never internally saw myself as a male. Internally, I have, since about 11 years old, always seen myself as female. Internally, that is how I have felt. Hid that for years. Because people not understanding the two kept me scared. But I'm not scared. about that stuff anymore. Because I've gotten to an age where I just don't care what other people think. But the thing is, when it comes to gender and sex, they're not interchangeable. And people need to stop interchanging them. As well, gender has nothing to do with your sexuality or your sexual orientation. Let's make that clear. This is where that person got things so wrong in his comment. Now, along with gender, there's your gender identity, and there's also your gender expression. How do you express the gender you feel inside? Now, depending on the person, they could do, say, they're transgender, say male to female transgender, right? They may do they may take hormones to make their body look the way their mind feels their body should be, right? They may change their clothing. I mean, ever since I can remember, I was a kid, I wore muted colors, blacks, grays. I kept away from the colors I actually wanted to wear because I was so concerned that people might think something was up with me. And I didn't want anybody knowing anything about how I felt internally. But the way you express yourself, you can do it through many ways. Some people do use hormones, right? Some people just do socially, a social transition, which is basically as far as I'm probably going to be able to go. But it's not like it's not like it's that hard to understand. Sex is what you're born with. Gender is how you feel internally. And telling people that are transgender that they're not doesn't solve the problem. Trying to legislate transgender people out of existence will not solve this problem. Offering affirming care does. As well, people that are transgender are at a higher risk for suicide. Not only from the dysphoric feeling of being in a body that you don't physically feel internally that you are. That is a very difficult thing to do. It is very difficult to live your life in a body that you don't feel like you belong in. That's what the trans youth in Texas are dealing with, right? But also, not only do they have higher rates of suicide because of dysphoria, they have higher rates of suicide due to lack of support. They come out as a kid, as a teenager, say, for example. They're ostracized by their friends, their peers. They're ostracized in many cases by their parents, their churches, their sports organizations, and now their states. So yes, transgender people do have a higher risk of suicide, or suicide attempts at least, than many other groups of people, especially youths. Because they are bullied relentlessly, and now they have to deal with their states coming after them. Now, let's talk about sexual orientation or sexuality. This is, of course, who you're attracted to. Who do you desire? Who do you want to be with? Right? In a sexual manner. And nowhere does this constitute one's gender. This has nothing to do with sexuality has nothing to do with someone's gender. Right? Sexuality has to do with what you're attracted to. Who do you want to be with? Right? Who are you going to have relationships going forward in your life? Right? And sexuality can be on a spectrum, just like gender. they both can be on a spectrum. All the way, like I say, for, on gender, all the way from cisgender to trans, right? And sexual orientation, you can be anywhere from heterosexual all the way to gay, right? There's there's nothing wrong with being anywhere on that spectrum. If you're, heterosexual, that's great. If you're gay, that's great. If you're in the middle, that's great. But it has nothing to do with your gender. Your sexual orientation as well has nothing to do with the parts between your legs. Because you can be born with male parts and still want to be with a man. You can be born with female parts and want to be with a woman. It happens. And there's nothing wrong with that either. Love who you want to love. Be the gender you feel you are inside. Display that gender, present your gender any way you feel comfortable. But don't confuse gender and sexuality, because they're not the same thing. And this is one of those talking points that right-wing people have. They try to label us pedophiles for trying to defend trans youth. One, because they want us to look bad. But two, they don't know the facts. They didn't even pass basic biology. I learned this stuff in like 7th or 8th grade. I think it was 7th grade biology I learned about this stuff. How is it that hard to understand? But I don't want to come across as angry at these people. I don't want to come across as mean or vindictive or sarcastic. So all I want to say here at the end of this video is do some learning. Educate yourself. Because that's what I'm trying to do here. I wanted to educate people on the facts. Now, you don't have to agree with me. You can leave all you want in the comments. I don't care. But I want you to understand the difference in these three things. Sex, what you're born with. Gender, what you identify as internally. And sexual orientation or sexuality is who you're attracted to. They're not interchangeable. They're not the same thing. Not one of those three things is directly connected for every single person. Things aren't binary. You may think they are. That there may only be ones and zeros, but there's not. There's those of us that are in the middle of all of it. I've spent a lot of time on Twitter going through, I guess the trans side of Twitter, I guess you could say. And I found a lot of people that are transgender that are, say, male to female, female to male, whatever. But most people I come across have been male to female. And they still like, they like other trans people. Right? Of the, that were born the same way. Right? Some of them are wanting to be, transition to be a woman, and they are sexually attracted to women. It happens. Then there's those people that fall in the middle where they like women, they like men. It's just life for them. So really, in parting, all I can say is this. Just be kind. Be supportive. And it takes you nothing to be nice. It costs you not one penny to be kind to trans people, or trans youth especially. It costs nothing to be kind. It costs you nothing to be supportive. And if you don't want to be supportive, just don't be mean. Just leave them alone. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. Is if you can't at least, at the minimum, be nice. At the minimum, don't be cruel. Don't chase them from their homes. Don't let your governments tell the youth that they can't be in sports, or that their parents are going to be put in prison because of who they are. At the end of the day, that's all I ask. Anyways, for everybody that watched this video to this point, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you down the road.